Yo, what is up mates, just Rick here, and today we're going to be going over some quick tips for beginners in Tree of Savior. Now, let me be frank here, I am not an expert or veteran in the game. My highest guy is just level 360, and I haven't done any endgame raids just yet. That being said, I've still picked up a lot of things along the way as I've been leveling several different alts. Most of that information is coming from other people who've already written guides and such, of which I'll be putting links to in the description of this video. But without further ado, let's go. Tip number 1, research is your friend. This is an obvious one, of course. Whenever you're stuck, your first instinct should be to resort to research first. There are a lot of cryptic things in this game, such as skills having hidden effects and interactions, or mainline quests that have puzzles in them. Odds are, someone's already talking about it. Google Senpai, of course, usually links to either the Tree of Savior subreddit posts or the official TOS forums, and those are good places to start. I'd say they are mostly active and have at least someone in that thread that knows the rundown to your question. I've seen incredibly useful guide posts here as well, such as what the Salis Convent is and how to run it, where all the secret collections are and how to get them, a rebuild updated leveling guide, as well as which questlines give you free quest gear. Sometimes, however, you might be interested in information more easily found in a database, and for that I like two websites, TOS Guru and TOS Base. TOS.Guru here is like the new hotness. The website is very new and intrinsically tied to the most updated version of the game. It's even got a very nice skill builder which can help you theory craft your next main character. All the information found here is extracted directly from the client itself, so you know the information here is updated. However, they don't have everything just yet, such as quests and NPC locations. For that kind of stuff, I like using TOS Base. It's kind of like Old Reliable, and since it's set up in wiki format, there is also an option for users to leave comments to further clarify on whatever you're searching for in the database. Just be careful, a lot of the content here has been swiftly outdated due to the rebuild patch, and honestly an unhealthy amount of neglect over time. Okay, I know I've got to talk about this next one before I get into the game, because otherwise the comments won't stop rolling in. Without getting into too much detail, because that deserves its own video, but do yourself a favor, and tip number 2, get yourself the Tree of Savior add-on manager. Add-ons in this game are essentially user-written code and graphics that are sanctioned by IMC and are not illegal to use, despite some of them seeming like downright cheats. They can add a ton of useful features and modifications to the game, including things such as clarified information on skill tooltips, an add-on to simulate your character's appearance, a way to zoom out your camera further, notifications on your map as to where the collection items are on the map, complete information on a mob even before you touch it, such as what your crit rate will be, and the massive list just keeps on going. This post right here by Elektrus on Reddit gives us a good rundown of add-ons that he thinks are helpful for beginners, and I just went off most of those. But the add-on manager itself has a hell of a lot more you can experiment with as well. You can even browse the more active JTOS add-ons that, while may not always be translated, still could be wildly useful. Okay, once you sign into the game, you'll be treated to the Lodge, which serves as your family's character select screen. Of course, aside from your characters and companions, tip number 3 is there are a few other things that you should check periodically in your Lodge. First off, your mail will have an N for new whenever there is something you haven't read or received yet. A lot of the times, event items and compensation items will be sent via this method, and then you choose which character will receive it. Be mindful, because a lot of the times these items have duration limits on it before the mail is removed. Make sure to redeem them, of course, before that happens. I also like checking down here where it tells me how much TP I have. And no, I'm not trying to act like some bigwig here. If you look closely, there are two types of TP. The one on the left is obtained normally by recharging it from the Steam page. 10 TP is equivalent to about 1 USD. On the right here though is basically free TP. This TP recharge is simply based on time, up to a maximum of 5, and whenever you spend TP, it will prioritize the use of this free TP first. Because of this, you actually have access to some TP items that cost up to 5 if you're strictly free to play player. Soul Orbs cost 4 TP and allow you to resurrect directly from wherever you died, and a Megaphone costs only 1 TP. If you do bother to purchase TP, a decent strategy is to spend only 4 of your own TP plus the 5 free extra TP to periodically buy yourself an EXP Tome. We'll be coming back to those EXP Tomes later, but for now, let's talk about our most recent update to the game, Rebuild. Tip number 4, what exactly is Rebuild? It's not important to get into the details, but Rebuild has completely shaken up the meta of combinations of classes that players used to pick. Skills have been moved around, adjusted and or changed, entire classes have been moved to other trees, you've got new abilities to deal with, and on top of that, you can only choose 3 classes out of the entire tree. This is not how the game worked before Rebuild, and because of that, it has forced the player base to now experiment with new builds and class combinations that synergize well with each other. Fortunately for me, I don't mind to experiment, so I'm having a blast, but it has been soul crashing for some people who had wildly successful builds before the patch and now have to work around it. If you're the kind of person that likes to be told what to do in terms of class choices and builds, then I'll be frank with you. Early on in this patch is not the best time to be looking for that direction. We've got a pretty good idea of what classes work together, but not necessarily what is the absolute best just yet. Not to mention some classes such as Assassin are already slated to get buffs later on, thus further shifting the meta around even more. Now for those of you guys who are completely confused as to what the idea here is with rebuild, well, I'll try to summarize it as succinctly as possible. Tip number 5, here are some general class building strategies. Your primary goal is to create a character whose 3 classes synergize with each other. That synergy can come in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's as simple as choosing a class that has a buff that works well for all 3 classes. Or sometimes there are specifically designed interactions, like how the Death Sentence skill on the Oracle has a special interaction with the Conviction skill on the Paladin class. A lot of the time this synergy can simply be accomplished naturally by choosing characters that utilize the same weapon type, such as the 2-hand sword synergy between Highlander and Doppelsodner, since you'll naturally be able to utilize all skills between the classes. But keep in mind there is an automatic weapon switching mechanic allowing you to seamlessly wear 2 different sets of weapons, so while it's natural to want to lean towards those types of classes, it doesn't necessarily mean they are the best choices. Also keep in mind that each skill generally has some kind of attribute that goes with it that can simply be upgraded with silver, and these attributes can wildly change the normal interaction of the skill. Make certain that you read those, since some of them are class defining if you don't. It's also quite important to look a little bit into the future with your character. Of course, as you can imagine, you can't just make a singular character that's the best for everything. You're gonna have to make some concessions based on what you want to do. Are you a solo type of player? Then maybe focusing so heavily on party buffs isn't all that necessary, and vice versa. It's kind of simple really. Do all or most of your class's skills synergize and complement each other well? And does your class choice represent the content that you mainly want to be doing? And with that, I think you can start to theory craft on your own, but be very careful in simply assuming things. You might have a debuff that improves the damage of piercing type attacks, but your main damage attacks are actually slash type damage, things like that. So read the descriptions as best you can and make certain that what you're planning actually works. But this is dragging on, and you can always do some extra research on your own or join a community of like-minded players, but hopefully this lays down the groundwork well enough to just get you started. Tip number 6, what's better, questing or grinding? Alright, I already have and am going to be in the future, always going to be asked, what's better, questing or grinding? So I'll put it as I see it. Grinding for levels is undoubtedly the fastest way to level. When combined with various EXP modifiers, it can get stupid easy to level. However, questing gives you things that you can't simply get by grinding, such as free selectable gear, additional stat points, titles, collections, and features to allow you to access all parts of the map for exploration. So here's my personal recommendation. Play your first character as your main one and follow the leveling guide by the Reddit mod Luna Palemoon here. It tells you specific quests that are recommended for various reasons, such as getting the Seal of Space and unlocking certain parts of the world map. If you decide to play another character, I personally just like grinding at that point and coming to the quest later. I've heard that about level 360 you can strictly do quests to get pretty darn close to the max level from there. But as you can imagine, there is no real wrong way to go about this. Play the game in level relevant content and you'll get to max level eventually. What's the rush really? Just keep in mind that there are EXP dailies that you should capitalize on no matter what your route is, such as instance dungeons, missions, and especially challenge mode. Don't know what those are? Well, the in-game help when you press F10 should help you out there and with many of the other things that this game offers. One thing that I didn't mention about leveling though is that there is actually one other way to get to max level that's probably the most efficient of them all, and that is tip number 7, abusing the heck out of EXP Tomes. First and foremost, EXP Tomes are a common event item, and we generally get a lot of them in the mail. Those event EXP Tomes, however, usually have a time limit of 2 weeks on them, after which they expire. You can mitigate this time limit, however, by going into the item merchant here and buying a 4x EXP Tome. Combining 4 EXP Tomes in a recipe, which can be done by hitting the insert key here and going into crafting, will net you a 4x EXP Tome that does not have an expiration. So not only is it more potent, you don't have the requirement of using it right away. Another neat thing about EXP Tomes is that they only count down whenever you are not in a town map. And you can probably see where I'm going with this. You can seriously abuse this feature by porting to Klaipeda and simply waiting to do content. If you only leave Klaipeda to do, say, challenge mode dungeons or instance dungeons, you can get a hell of a lot more use out of the tome than the duration on it would suggest. Use it as late as possible, say right before killing an instance boss, and try to stay in town as long as possible whenever you're not. Overpowered, right? Well, don't feel compelled to lock yourself in town just to do this. I just figured I should mention it for those of you who like doing dailies and nothing else. Tip number 8, what gear and items should you keep? Well, let's look at the inventory. One cool thing about Tree of Savior is that your inventory has a weight limit but does not have an item limit. You can put as many unique items as you can carry into your inventory bag. That means everything in your quest and materials tab, just hold on to it. You never know when you might need it for your collection or simply for crafting something. You can, however, get rid of weak potions that are no longer working for you, since having a lot of these eats up your weight limit. Now your storage is another hurdle entirely. You see, your personal storage is obviously fine, it has 60 slots by default, but your team storage, most likely what you'll want to do when you want to transfer items to your alt, is only freaking 4 items large. You can expand it with silver or by getting a token, but this makes transferring bulk items or consolidating them very cumbersome, as you can imagine. The idea of having a mule sit here completely overweight full of items, however, is possible if you're willing to sacrifice a character slot to do it. In my opinion, I think you should only keep rare gear or higher for selling in magic gear that you already have an idea of using on an alt. Everything else honestly is not rare enough to hold on to, and you can simply disassemble it at the blacksmith or just outright sell it. Don't forget also, in terms of gear, there are quest gears that you can get that are free, suitable for your level range, and account transferable. Again, refer to this guide here by ohhgibo to see when and where those are. You really only need to start thinking about stronger gear than that when the free quest gear stops coming, after which you can use the marketplace to find you a level suitable weapon to help you keep going. Hell, up until level 120, I didn't use anything but the gear sold at the equipment merchant due to the effectiveness of partner buffs. Speaking of which, what preparations should you make before you go out into the real world? Tip number 9, here are some things to do before leaving Klaipeda. I like to think of them as a checklist of sorts, and while yes, there are a lot of other things that you could do, this is a guide mostly for newbies. First off, immediately when you have enough money, the most important buffs that you should try to get ASAP are obtainable at a player shop that looks like this. Get the Grace Additional Holy Hits and Grace Additional Holy Damage. They are called Hardener buffs, and at least in the early game, they absolutely carry you. Now, it's not as strong as it was before rebuild, but it's still not at all optional even at the end game. If you have the extra cash and a decently powerful weapon, I also like refining my weapon. This is an option at a squire shop to temporarily sharpen your weapon for an hour to give it extra damage. Not that big of a deal, but it's kind of nice if you've got the extra cash. As a safety net, you really ought to have a scroll to get you back to your home base. You can buy them at the item merchant. Klaipeda is the most common, but you can also use Orsha if you want. I have like 20 or so of each on hand, since you're not always near a goddess statue to do that for you. Not to mention, if you're really far out there, it's more expensive to use a goddess statue to get back than it would be to just use a scroll. Lastly is potions. Now, quests give you a ton of them, but quite frankly, they lose their potency fast. In fact, they're pretty much useless after about level 100. What you'll need after are a healthy stash of player-created level 15 potions from the marketplace. I'd say have about 50 of each on hand, and that'll be enough. And now, you're finally ready to go. For my last tip, I just want to give you some direction as to how you probably want to tackle content that is outside of town. First and absolutely foremost is on your main character, you're going to want to get 100% exploration on every map that you encounter. You'll see when I hit N, my map is chock full of areas that have this little compass on them. That indicates that I have 100% exploration on those maps. In essence, it just means that I've walked around and uncovered all of these white squares on the map. A couple of nuances about accomplishing this though. Sometimes it's impossible to get 100% of the map simply by walking. You may need to complete a quest line close by, or if you see one of these pillars, you'll need the Seal of Space quest item that very conveniently will be obtained if you follow the leveling guide again by Luna Palemoon. It should also be noted that you can actually still be given 100% exploration if you leave say 1 or 2 squares still white. Why do you want 100% exploration though? The main reason is it's actually benefiting your entire account massively. You see, every map that you explore 100% will grant you a few EXP cards that are suitable for the level range of the map explored. And there are hundreds of maps, meaning hundreds of EXP cards. You redeem them at the NPC Vivora, and the cool thing is, you do it once on one of your characters, all of your characters on your account will get them as well. It goes without saying that this is a massive benefit for all characters for not a lot of effort. The other things I suggest, like I said before, the epic quests are real nice for giving a lot of extra stats that you won't get normally by grinding. You're probably going to want to do them at some point for those extra stat points, stamina points, and title. Might as well do them if they're nearby. These quests can also help you in exploring the map more efficiently due to the fact that once you complete the objective, you can teleport immediately to the turn-in NPC by hitting backspace. So long as you don't turn in the quest, you can even use this feature to port to that specific location from anywhere at any time for even more abuse. You can even intentionally save these locations by simply removing the checkmark that labels it as an active quest. Lastly, and this is where the TOS add-on manager comes in, one that is really helpful is the treasure map add-on that indicates where the collection is found on the map if it has one. Collections are more thoroughly explained again in the F10 help, but they give your account permanent stats for completing them, and getting the boxes now while you're already here is helpful so you don't have to backtrack and look for them later. And that, guys, is my list of my top 10 Tree of Savior newbie tips. Trust me, there are probably a lot more tips that I left out, but that's why I implore you to leave any extra tips that you might have in the comments below to help other players out. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Hope these tips have helped you, and I will catch you nights later.